Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. Glad to have you with us today. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker. I'm the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, here with Branden Kunath, the National Programs Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. And today we're going to talk about something that, if it's not important to you, it should be important to you, and it is certainly very important to us. But before we jump into that, I want to remind you, again, if you're listening somewhere else, maybe you're watching and have not yet done this, you need to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is where all of the content that we produce as an organization, and we produce a lot of content. This is where it's all housed. And if you're not subscribed, you're missing it. If you are subscribed and you have not yet hit the notification bell, please do that. That lets you know when new content comes online. And if you're listening somewhere else, jump over to YouTube and check that out. You know you're going to be watching cat videos and little kids doing crazy stuff anyhow. So while you're there, jump over to the Mighty Oaks channel and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell. If you like what you see, share it out, comment, and we'd love to hear from you. So that is where you need to start. But today's conversation, again, is an important one. It's about the topic of faith, how important faith is. I think faith is something that we argue about and discuss. We get excited about, get upset about sometimes.
Very, yeah.
People have different opinions on exactly what faith is and how it's important. But I want to talk today about faith, and specifically how faith impacts those who are dealing with trauma or life issues, and that's really where we spend most of our time, is talking about those things. Mm-hmm. So let's just jump into it. Let's start talking about faith. Why don't we start, Branden, if we can? We'll come back and try to define faith, even talk about the path to faith. But talk to us about people that come to one of our programs who maybe they would say something like this: I used to be a person of faith. I was raised in a home that believed in faith. And these are broad terms. We'll get more specific as we go through this. But they may say, I believe in God, I don't believe in God, I believe in God, but I hate God, I believe in God, but I'm far from God, and anywhere along that spectrum. And we spend really several days talking about what it looks like to have a relationship with God. We would say what it is to have a relationship with your Creator. Believing in something transcendent, something bigger than yourself, is essential to move forward. Talk for a minute about maybe even your own story, but how faith and an understanding of faith impacts someone who's dealing with just the trauma and the mess of life.
Well, yeah, going into it, that understanding of what faith is, can be very relative. And for me personally, I never really nailed that down of, okay, what is faith? And I guess I would have fell in the arena of almost blind faith aspect, where I was believing something, but I really just didn't understand why.
Sure.
So it felt like I would have been just believing it just because. And with what you were talking about with guys and gals that come to the program for the different host of reasons, they're searching for something, and we have to be able to present something to them, and in kind of our bridge to them is truth, right? It is trying to get them to understand the truth and understanding why faith is important, mm-hmm. and what is truth behind that. Where I strongly feel a lot of people, they're on a quest for happiness rather than a quest for truth.
Right.
And because they're searching for happiness, well, we know that's an emotional based feeling that changes all the time, and everything where truth is truth. It doesn't change. And so really, I mean, to talk about faith, we got to understand what faith is. And the approach that we do is we lay out, as we say in the men's program, we lay out a practical biblical blueprint of what manhood looks like. And we ask, in the men's program, the men to compare and contrast their life to that. And those sticking points, those issues, those arguments, that's not against me saying it. So if I'm presenting something, that's not me they're having the issue with, but it's what we present as truth, which is God's word.
Right.
The women do the same thing. So that's our standard we try to set, or the foundation, so that everybody's starting from the same starting point, everybody's equal, and then we work from there, so we can establish, okay, this is what faith is, this is why it's important, and how do you apply it to your life?
Yeah. Truth is I was going to say really important, but it's not really important. It's foundational to that. Again, we'll dive into what exactly is faith, or what would be our perspective on faith. But faith, simply defined, it's confidence. It's not belief. A lot of people have belief, but they don't have faith. We could say, I believe in God, but I don't trust him to manage my life or to supply my needs, or whatever. So faith is not belief. A lot of people have belief but don't have faith. Faith is confidence. Well, if you're going to have confidence, you need to have confidence in something. And the Bible, you mentioned this, that you had a blind faith. The Bible doesn't ask us to have a blind faith. In fact, when the Bible describes faith in Hebrews chapter 11, it says it is substance and evidence.
You stole what I was going to say.
Well, I do what I can.
Man.
There are a few passages that describe this, right?
There's nothing new under the sun. So
there's nothing new under the sun. And I stole it from the Bible.
Yes.
But when we understand that it's not close your eyes and hope. That's how people live faith. And then they say, well, I tried faith, but it let me down. Really what they tried was blind hope, like jumping off into the abyss and just believing enough that something's going to catch them.
Yeah.
The Bible says that faith, confidence, is based on something. There is evidence, there is substance, it's real. So when we present faith to people who are either struggling with the idea of faith, or they would say, I had faith, or I was a person of faith, but it let me down, we don't tell them to believe more or try harder. The first thing we do is say there is a source for belief. There is a place in which you need to put your confidence.
Yeah.
And that place is not first God. This is really, really important. If you are looking at God or believing in the idea of God and saying, I put my confidence in what I perceive to be God, or at least that idea, will let you down.
Yeah.
The Bible tells us that faith comes by hearing.
Really? You're going to go there again?
And hearing by the word of God. I'm going to keep talking so you can't jump in.
I'm just going to leave so you can finish.
No, I'm going to finish this thought, and then I'm going to let you explain it.
Okay, all right.
I'm doing the easy work.
Okay, all right.
I'm asking you to do the heavy lifting. So faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. I have a thought I'm going to finish, and then I'm going to get out of the way here. Okay? We're told that in order to have a relationship with God, we need to have faith in Jesus. What is that faith based on? It's based on the written word of God. It's based on what we read in the Bible, the blueprint. And our faith is really in that. It's in what has been said. Now, it's based on evidence. Again, we could spend a lot of time here, but one of the reasons we believe the Bible is because it was written, particularly the New Testament, in the time of the people who would have witnessed those things. They would have received that and looked at it, and they could have called the bluff if it wasn't real. So there are a lot of evidences. That's a different discussion, why we believe the Bible. But we look at the Bible as truth. We put our faith in the truth, and that truth then leads us into a relationship with God. Now, talk about how you walk someone through that process who may be adversarial to the idea of truth. But if we can't get them from unbelief to belief, they're going to remain broken.
Yeah. So, but to kind of piggyback off of the scriptures that you stole from me.
If you're going to steal from the Bible. That's my motto.
I mean, that's the best place to go. But you talked about how we try to point everything to Jesus, right? And the reason and everything of who Jesus is, and what John 3:16 really means, and we can put our faith and push all of our weight on that and understanding that. Well, Hebrews 11:6, it talks about how without faith we cannot please God because we need to know who He is and what He's done for us. So, to go into trying to walk somebody through that, well, we have to establish, not in spite not because of the lack of evidence, but because here's the evidence that we can lay out and walk somebody through that it's not just a bunch of books that were put together by random guys and that just happened to make one book and all that, but the seriousness behind it and where it started, how all those writings came together to make one complete thing and read it as a whole rather than kind of nitpicking and piecing it together to fit you, which I think a lot of people tend to do that from time to time, is they'll pick out what kind of works for them and what they don't like, and it's not a buffet. But because of our own nature, we tend to want to do that. So we want to make us happy. We want to make things work for us. So we don't necessarily look at the things that will ultimately convict us or make us ask those questions. So we have to make sure that person that we're talking to understands that. And they have to understand that, hey, I'm presenting something to you. I'm not forcing anything on you, because everybody has their choice. The same way that I have a choice to believe, they have a choice not to, because like you said, there's a huge difference between just not believing at all, believing on, if you will, than rather than believing in. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people fall. There's scripture that talks directly of those that know the truth, but still choose to go against it, that they'll be judged even worse. Which that's kind of a very scary thought in my mind of people that ultimately know God's word.
But you make a decision to.
And you outright make a decision. So again, we just have to present it to them, and we can't force it. We can't. It's not. You can't change somebody's mind by sticking your hands in there and molding it to them. But you have to explain it so that they can either ask questions or begin the process to trust in. It's the same kind of the same way of when you get somebody that's never flown before. What's one of the first things that most people will say to kind of help them relax, or that flying's not a big deal, right? They'll source something as simple as, well, flying is safer than driving a car, right? So now they have something to kind of step back and say, oh, well, really? Well, what does that mean? And then when you can walk them through the process of, like, think about it, how many planes go up in a day and all that, and compare stats and all that stuff, which I'm terrible at. But you give that person a source of confidence where they can have faith to understand they're going to get on something that's a big metal thing that's going to go up in the air, same way that being on a naval ship floating in the middle of it doesn't make sense at all. But there are smarter people that I could never come close to, that have went through all that labor and work and all that stuff to build that, which the same way the writers of that was inspired by God gave us or allowed us this thing that we have, the Bible today, so that we can go to and where my greatest comfort what came from was what you were saying in Romans 10, where because now I'm hearing, my faith is going to grow stronger, and I can trust in it because I know exactly what that means, rather than just kind of the I think this kind of works out, or it kind of works for me, so I'm going to follow it, which we know is a very flawed case.
So it works for me, so I'm going to follow it is flawed by itself. And I think the process has to begin with, there is a source of truth. Let's talk about why we have confidence in the source of truth, and we spend a lot of time talking about that. There's a great, for anyone who's interested, there's a great video, you can find it, entitled Why the Bible by Pastor Vodi Bakum. If you're interested in that, maybe we can even put that in our notes for this video. Spend 45 minutes, do yourself a favor, spend 45 minutes and watch that. It's a message. If you're not into preaching, just set that aside and listen to him. But he breaks that down, why we believe the Bible, why we can have confidence in the Bible. But like anything else, we have to decide to have confidence in the evidence that we see. But there is a second part, and I think the second part is, I put confidence in the Bible. It worked for me, and this is testimony to that. Now, we spend a lot of time sharing testimonies. I think it's instructive as well that the Bible is full of testimonies. It's full of the lives of people. Hebrews 11 that talks about faith.
Really?
Yeah, it's huge. Not only does it say this is what faith is, but it says, now let me illustrate that through the lives of people.
Yes. Cain and
everybody else.
Noah.
And a lot of other people.
Moses.
Right?
Yeah.
Hebrews chapter 11.
Yes.
So when we don't just say the Bible is important, the Bible is true, and here's why. We also say we have decided to put our confidence in it, and this is how it's impacted our lives. And for those, I think, who are watching, they need to, if you're struggling with faith, look at someone who's accepted that and lived their life according to it and watch how that plays out. But for someone trying to communicate faith to someone else, I think the two have to be together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it goes through faith, your obedience grows, and they should be together. Which those two things together are evidence of a true believer, right? So it's not just a one-time thing where now I put my trust and faith in God and through Jesus Christ and everything's changed. Like, it doesn't work that way. Now, obviously, you want to have biblical change of putting off and putting on, right? But that's you. That's your doing. Not saying that you're working for salvation. That's not what I'm saying. But you're working to be obedient to please God, because that's what it boils down to, right? Is everything you do, we should be asking, am I glorifying God in what I do? And because I'm asking myself that question, I'm ultimately having faith and understanding that I'm doing that because I understand who God is, who Jesus was, why he came down in the form of man, walked the earth, did all what he did, and then ultimately died for us. So one of those things that I really try to help carry over for myself, my family, alumni in the program is where faith and obedience come together, and to help them walk that out. And that's essentially why we came together and put the 4 B's together. To be in prayer, be in the Word, be in fellowship, meaning be in church.
And that's what we encourage our graduates to do, those 4 B's.
Exactly. And even when we get applicants that will apply or be interested and they're not necessarily ready to go, we'll ask them, are they interested, or what do you think about those things? Just because we understand that how important it is, so that they can have trust and confidence in faith, and to be able to walk that through, rather than, when I heard the Why the Bible video for the first time, I guess I had been a Christian for a while, but that question still struck me hard, because I would have fallen into the categories of, well, it works for me, or was raised this way, or, well, one of
I
those
heard someone
ones.
say this is important.
And I truly believed in it, but to try to explain to somebody what the true conviction and feeling that I have inside doesn't necessarily work. They're going to watch my actions and see all that stuff, and for somebody that's only at a program for maybe 5 days, they're not really going to get a good example of it. That's why we talk about in our instructor meeting that we're always being watched by these guys that come through, because they're just our nature. We're looking to be able to point something out and say, nope,
discount what's being said.
It's all big,
Yeah, so faith is based on truth, and we have to examine, why do we believe this? I ask this question often. Why do you believe the Bible? But I'll tell people often, don't ever feel bad for asking, why do I believe that? And if someone tells you to blindly believe the Bible or blindly believe what they're saying without asking questions, you need to get away from that person quickly. Because, Christ not only asked questions, but encouraged others to ask questions and answered questions. We're told to study to show ourselves approved, to understand these things. Peter said we should be able to articulate the hope that's in us. So it's important to ask questions and to come to answers.
Yeah.
So there is truth. We look at that. Why do we believe this? We come to a conclusion. It's trustworthy. We put our faith in the words. And then we look at the lives of people who have said they believe that. And if the words are true, then those lives will reflect that truth. If they really believe it, your belief leads to actions. Your actions are based on your belief. Whether you say, I have no belief, well, then that I have no belief is going to impact your actions. So we see that played out, and we could package that and say, this is faith. Why is faith essential if real life change is going to take place? Because there are people, we know these people, we talk to these people who would say, if I just work harder, if I'm more disciplined, if I can get this in order, then my life will be okay. My struggles here are because of something that they'll give. And if I just deal with that, then I can get to where I need to be. And while all of those things can be helpful tools, without the essential component of faith, there will never be real healing, restoration, or ultimately hope. Why is faith necessary? So we talked about understanding the Bible, the foundation of faith, looking at the lives of people who say they have faith and following that witness. Why is faith so important?
Well, initially, we cannot be, what's the word? We can't be responsible for our own redemption. Or we can't pay for our own redemption, first off. But within that, we also need to understand that if there is a creator, and we were created for something, the creator has created us in a purposeful manner to do certain things in a certain way. And it's just like if you were to go and look at your owner's manual of your vehicle, there's things in there that is important for you to understand how to operate, fix, work, and all that stuff with your vehicle so that the vehicle will last and not just add oil to a certain truck for years and years and years.
It worked out for me.
But eventually it
won't work out anymore.
Eventually it's going to break down.
This is not about me. This is about you. So keep me out of this.
But still, you have to go back to the owner's manual. And I'm not saying the Bible is an owner's manual. I wouldn't ever classify it as that. But it is our life manual so that we can understand what all that means, so that
what the Creator intends for us to do.
So when we have questions, because Ravi Zacharias says there's a huge difference between doubts and questions. Right. So with your statement of why do I choose to believe the Bible? It's not a bad thing. The same thing with my kid. My son wants to bug me about those off the wall Bible questions at 10:30 at night when he knows he's supposed to go to bed, right? It's great to have questions. That means you're interested in learning or progressing. So having those questions about what does it mean to discipline myself more, like to get into meditating, and why is that important, and what sets Christianity apart from other things, and to be able to kind of sort through all that so that you can truly process everything, so that you just don't have a clouded table of stuff, which that clutter doesn't help anybody. You ask any infantry guy that's been on a deployment somewhere, and then they come home to something and there's just a cluttered room. It drives them nuts. Well, most I've had plenty of Marines that
they didn't care.
But for most, they need to have some organization. So we have to learn how to organize our life with the Creator and His design in mind. So through faith, I can go and trust that I'm going to open up God's Word, the Bible, and that God's Word is good for teaching, rebuking, correction, all of that.
Instruction,
And so that when I do need to find a question or an answer to a question that I have, I can go to that and not essentially trust or look for the plethora of answers that are out there. If you Google how to whatever,
anything,
I think I remember you were talking maybe in one of the marriage classes, but you were talking about if you go to Barnes and Nobles online or something, and you look up like love, marriage, or whatever. There's thousands and thousands of books.
There's like 140,000 books on that. Yeah.
And so, which one do you go to? Where do you start?
Yeah.
And so looking in that, and then looking at how many times in the Bible faith is mentioned, so just faith, and just faith, not faithful or all that, but faith is mentioned, over 250 times. So when I see something like that, when my mind works weird like that, I want to Google, well, how many times is that said? That kicks my mind over to, well, that must be important. There must be a reason why that's mentioned in there so many times, that, even in Acts 9, I believe 22, where Paul is strengthening himself and bringing himself out so that he can go and prove who Jesus was. He had to have the faith because everybody hated him. Yeah. Everybody knew, and they were questioning, wasn't this the guy that was just, persecuting us? So he had to rely on that faith and trust to be able to step out and understand what he's doing and why. And the same thing of getting guys and gals that come to the program to understand this is for you, but this is for everybody else that you come in contact with. Families that need to be restored, relationships, and just all down the road.
Yeah, that's great. It's people who come to us, and this is people everywhere. We have all of this junk right on the table, and the thing that allows us to understand how it should be ordered and how it should be organized and how we should live through that is the Bible. It's God's plan for our lives. And apart from that, we're just doing the best that we can. You mentioned that verse, Hebrews 11:6, that without faith it's impossible to please God. And sometimes when I'm talking about that verse, I'll say, or ask the question, why is it impossible to please God? And the answer I'll give, and it's a much larger context there in that verse, but the answer I'll give is because if our faith is not in God, if our confidence is not in our Creator, then we will only ever be as good as we can possibly be. And that's a hopeless place to live. And I think that's where a lot of people live. A lot of people get to a point in their lives where they say, well, if this is as good as it gets, if I'm as good as it gets, if my intellect, my ability, my opportunities, if this is as good as it gets, really what you're saying is my faith is in myself. Well, that faith is going to let you down. That's as good as you'll ever get. Yeah. You may be extremely capable, but if your faith is not in God, your Creator, then you'll only ever be as good as you can be. Whereas if your faith is in God, your Creator, then we understand He has a plan for our lives that's much bigger than anything we could imagine. Yeah. He'll take us places we never thought we could go. He'll accomplish things in us and through us that would be impossible if our confidence wasn't in Him. So why can't we please Him? Because He has something bigger in mind for us. And if it's all about what we can do, we will fall short.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think a lot of people fall short because they say, well, I can do these things. I can do yoga or serious meditation or whatever. None of those things are bad in their place, but none of those things align your life to what God created you to live.
I like to try to explain it to them that what's sustainable for that period of time. Like you said, you can do jiu-jitsu, you can do weightlifting, running, arts and crafts, all those things for there's hobbies and things that can definitely help recondition your mind or help you get over certain things, but is it sustainable? As far as how long you can do it and truly what's it going to benefit? What do you sacrifice because you want to do that? Chad talks about how even though he was able to get back on the mats, it was good, but now he was spending pretty much his entire day on it. So something's ultimately going to give. So what can be sustainable and just that idea of like, man, I never thought about long term, longevity, not just trying to get from Monday to Tuesday to okay, now Friday and weekends here, but what
will carry me forward?
My pursuit, my goals, my eternity in mind. Not just the day-to-day, which is one of those things I really think that separates us from other programs, organizations. Not again, like you said, they're not bad.
Sure.
but what hope are we presenting to them?
Yeah, the focus is not just let's get through this event or this thing that we're dealing with. Let's put our focus on something that's going to carry us forward. And that thing, to use a word, is transcendent. It means it's bigger than us. It's bigger than our situation, and that transcendent one is God, and we put our faith in Him. So that's one aspect of it, and that's a very important aspect of it. I think the other very important aspect of it is that real healing, when we're talking about the emotional and the spiritual, when we're talking about dealing with trauma and those things, the emotional and spiritual healing, it can only happen truthfully when we enter into a relationship with God. And a lot of the other things that people use to deal with trauma, to deal with emotional brokenness and spiritual brokenness, really they're band-aids that eventually will wear off and and come off, or they've got that sucking chest wound we like to talk about, and someone's hand is over it, and that that allows them to breathe right now, but eventually that situation is going to change and they're going to be right back to where they were. Our real problem as human beings, and this is where people watching and listening go, okay, that's where you lost me. Right? I'm turning this off right now. Our real problem is not what's happened to us. Our problem is innate. It's inborn. It's who we are as human beings. It's that we are born broken. And trauma and life and all that stuff, as bad as those things can be, they don't make us more or less broken. We start out broken. And so until we have a relationship that occurs through faith with God, we cannot experience real healing. It's something we'll always be struggling with. And that relationship happens with God by understanding who His Son Jesus is, the fact that He died to pay for our sin that we're born with. He paid for it so that we don't have to. And because He's God, even though He's put in the grave, He rose again 3 days later. We've talked about this even on this show. There's another episode that we recorded. If you'd like to, you can jump back and look at that. I think I spent 30 minutes or 35 minutes talking through this. But that faith, understanding what He did for us and accepting that gift, again, by faith, because the Bible tells us what He did and why He did it and what that means. And we see in the lives of people who have believed that, how that changed their life and what that did and the healing that that brings. And then we, by faith, say, I believe it and I'm accepting the forgiveness. That's where real, the word redemption is used, value is added. That's where forgiveness of sins, that's where it happens. And that's where the sustainable, not just for this life, but for life eternal, that's where it happens. And to say that you can be healed spiritually or emotionally, you can be healed apart from that, it's factually inaccurate. It's not true. And people who are trying to be healed apart from faith, a faith relationship with God, are going to fall short.
Yeah.
We see this all the time. And it's funny, people will have a conversation with us and they'll say, well, I like what you're saying. I like all the stuff you're saying, but I want to leave the God part out. Can I do that?
I wouldn't advise that, but again,
you can try.
But it always happens where eventually people will come to that point where like, oh man, I listened to you guys from the start, and then there's plenty that have it, and that's where it comes back to we all have a choice, and the same way that anybody that comes to the program, any legacy program, we take anybody as long as you meet that requirement of being eligibility of having served. You can come from any faith background, no faith background, whatever it is, because again, we're going to present it to you the same exact way, and as the blueprint of man. As manhood is supposed to be, women do the same exact thing, and you're going to look at it and decide what you want to do with it. And I'm not going to try to weave it on you, or we're not waving a magic wand or anything. Not too many people that I've seen that have went through the program, went home, and I don't want to say brought Jesus home with them, but decided that should be that fixed, that their salvation should be in Jesus. And they just went home with just a couple of tools in their bag. I don't know many of them that didn't contact us later, or things worked out really great for them.
Yeah.
Where even those that have left, myself included, you walk away, you're still going to stumble, you're still going to fall.
Yeah.
But the difference, I think, is between a believer and a non-believer is what can you return back to?
You have a foundation. Yeah.
The medications are going to only go for so long. You're going to build up a tolerance, or they're just not going to work. Therapy, you're going to get tired of talking, or that person you're not going to connect with, and work's going to beat you down. All those things are going to happen. But I can always go back and anytime I have a question, a worry, a complaint, even though I want to rip the door off the hinges or anything like that, I'm easily reminded, what should I be doing? I should go to God's Word, which goes to what's sustainable, what's lasting, what can I count on to get me through that? Prayer, reading God's Word.
That, as we conclude kind of this discussion, I think that's the final point that needs to be said here, is that faith has been misrepresented as something that gets you what you want. If I have faith, and it's been misrepresented by Christians or so-called Christians and churches and a lot of other people, and I won't defend any of those people or talk about them, but there are those who listen to a conversation like this and they say, well, I tried faith, but it didn't work for me. And what they mean by that often is, I put my faith in God, and my finances, my relationships, my whatever, it didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes faith, particularly in the Christian world, is misrepresented as, if you believe enough, and if you trust enough, and if you pray enough, and if you do enough stuff, then everything in your life is going to smooth out and get better. And again, that's just not true. Now, you may be a person of faith and have a life that is pretty smooth. Your relationships are good, your finances are good, your work situation's strong, your kids love you. You may, but you also may be a person of faith who, and there are people around the world, as Americans we're very spoiled in this, but there are people around the world who believe in God and trust God and have a relationship with God and could talk about what we just talked about for hours in a deeper way than we possibly could. And they're persecuted by their governments. They've been rejected by their families. Having faith in the sense that we're talking about it, believing in God, having a relationship with God through Christ because of what Christ did for us, that type of faith does not necessarily mean that when you go home from a program like ours, or when you get up off your couch and you say, I'm going to believe and I'm going to trust that everything's going to smooth out in your life. Faith is not so that you can get what you want. Faith in God and in His Word is so that you can align your life to the person you were actually created to be. And there is a huge, huge difference.
Very well put.
Thank you.
I knew it.
I do my best to put things well. But yet people come back sometimes and say, I tried this and my wife is still mad at me. Because it took you 15 years to make her really mad.
Yeah.
You're not going to fix that this weekend.
Yeah.
But my finances, my this, my that, my other thing, I tried God and it didn't work. And my question is always, what did you expect God, when you say it didn't work, what does that mean? What was God supposed to do?
What does it mean to try? That's a funny thing, not to jump back in it, but when you try God, it's interesting. Yeah. I get what they're saying, but it's not like you're trying some dish or delicacy,
right? Some kind of medication.
Yeah. Like you were going to say, what did you expect out of that? That's not faith. That was like, I'll give it a shot.
Right.
That's not faith.
Right.
That's not even trust.
Right.
So
that's not even confidence. Yeah. Faith. What a huge topic.
Yeah, we could definitely go on, and it's obviously a much bigger discussion and should be, but it's one of those things that believers should really be asking themselves of what is faith and what does it mean to me. Ask yourself that question, why the Bible? Like if you're one of those people that have never really asked yourself that question, go visit Pastor Blockham's video, and man, he will educate you, that's for sure. He's been he's been around the block for sure.
Yeah, that video is incredible. There's another series of videos, actually another YouTube channel. We're just promoting everybody today. Matt Whitman is his name. 15-minute Bible. I think it's called a 10-minute Bible. 10-minute Bible? 10-minute Bible hour. It's not an hour, it's 10 minutes. But it's a 10-minute Bible hour. Anyhow, Matt has been on the show as well. You can find his episode.
It's like math for Marines right there.
Yeah, it's math for the Marines. But that's his entire channel is talking about this, why we believe the Bible, and can we have confidence in the Bible. And man, he said something on our show. He said, at this point in life and history, there is no reason a person couldn't believe that the Bible is accurate and true. We have so many resources available to us. But ask yourself that question. And if you're a person who's struggling with this idea of faith, you have to figure it out. You have to walk down the path and ask the questions and let the questions take you where they lead. There is nothing in me that's afraid of a person asking honest questions about God. Now, there are people who have agendas and they're slanted one direction or the other. That's a different story. But if you sincerely desire to know what God wants you to do and what you should believe, then get a copy of the Bible. You can get it on your phone. You can get a hard copy of it. You can find it anywhere. We're very, very, very blessed. Open the Bible up. You can start reading anywhere. I'd encourage you to start reading in the New Testament, specifically the book of John, if that's where you want to start, or the book of Mark. Great places to start. Start reading and ask real questions, and just go where those answers lead you, and I'm confident you'll end up in the right place. But
For sure.
Faith, don't try to live your life without a confident, solid understanding of faith. Hope it's helped you today. Appreciate the conversation.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. For those of you that are watching, please, if you have not, I remind you all the time, but if you have not, subscribe, like, share this content out. I think episodes like this can be a tremendous help to folks who are struggling with this. I get asked all of the time. I've got a family member or a friend who they really need help. They really need to know the answers to some of these questions, but they won't let me talk to them anymore. What should I do? Send them a link to this video or other videos, other content we have on our website and on our YouTube channel. Send them the content. Let them figure it out for themselves, but just make it available. And I think that can be a great help to them. For those of you that are listening elsewhere, thank you for listening. For those of you that are watching, really appreciate you watching and spending this time with us. And we'll talk to you next time. I so appreciate that conversation. The topic of faith is absolutely essential for every human being on the planet. And I would argue, I would contest that all of us have some degree of faith in something. Humanism is faith in myself. There are many who would have faith religiously in something else, something outside of themselves. But this issue of faith, it's how we're wired. It's how we're put together to believe in something really outside of our own experience, outside of ourselves. And yet, particularly as Americans, we live in a world where this idea of faith, we've talked about this briefly in other videos, but the fastest growing religious demographic in the United States right now is that of none. No faith. People are marking that on census forms and surveys and these political forms. I don't have faith. Well, really, that's probably not true. But this idea of believing in God or believing in a God or believing in something that would be termed religious is really going away in a lot of ways in our country. And this topic, again, is so important, regardless of where you fall religiously and what your experience has been with the church and however you would define all of those things. You need to stop and really dive into this "what do I believe?" question. For a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons is it will change how you live. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But beyond that, it will change your perspective on what happens after you live. And we're all going to die. Not a surprise. I think we all know that. We're all going to die at some point. Really happy news. We're all going to die. What happens after that? Your perspective on faith informs your understanding of that. But a couple of things I wanted to bring to you in conclusion as we wrap up today, and again, trying to just bring everything that was just said to kind of a conclusion that we can all get our hands around, in summary type of statement. One of the things we understand is that people live without faith. People live without faith. Now, I just said most people believe in something, most people have faith, but a lot of people live their lives, at least practically speaking, without faith. They live as though there is nothing beyond themselves. They live as though there is nothing bigger. They live as though they are the end-all and be-all. And we see this played out in our culture. It's screaming to us. We ask the question, why are people so angry? Why do people experience so much anxiety? Why are people medicating themselves with drugs and alcohol and other things? Why are people so desperate in their lives? We're living at a place in our country right now where health professionals are trying to figure it all out. And we have to ask the question, why are people struggling so much? Probably a lot of answers to that question. I would say that fundamentally, foundationally, one of the reasons people struggle so much in a country that has so much to offer and has such an incredible history, one of the reasons people struggle so much is because they live, at least practically speaking, as though they have no faith. They have no faith. They're not looking at anything outside of themselves. When we don't look at something outside of ourselves, we look within ourselves and we become entirely self-absorbed, selfish. This is something that we all struggle with, that we all deal with, but the focus on self is a lack of faith in something bigger, something outside of ourselves. So much of what we see and what we experience in the world can be explained by a lack of faith. Here's the second thing that I hope you'll take away from our conversation today. It's this: faith is based on evidence. Faith is based on evidence. I've spent most of my adult life talking about topics of faith and dealing with faith and trying to help people understand faith. I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to figure it out myself and answer these questions for myself. I once believed, and I think a lot of people believe, that faith is closing your eyes and stepping into the abyss and just hoping against hope that it will all work out somehow. We'll say things to people: you just need to have faith in this business venture, in this relationship. You just need to have faith. You need to trust that everything's going to work out. And while I appreciate the sentiment of that, trust in something without evidence to base that trust on, really in a lot of ways is foolish. We don't do that in most areas of our life, and yet when it comes to eternal things, when it comes to this question of God and His relationship with us, we say, well, faith, you just have to believe. I get it. But not even God asks us to just believe. We talked about this, and Branden, worked through this as we had our discussion, but faith is based on evidence. Hebrews chapter 11, that's in the New Testament, chapter 11, it starts off by saying to us that faith has evidence and it has substance. There's something that you can hang on to. We look even at our world and how our world spins on its axis, and the fact that everything works together to make the atmosphere do what it does and to keep the temperatures on Earth consistent and constant. And we can talk about climate change, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the incredible balance that is required just to make things work. We could look down from the universe and from our world to the human body. The complexities of the human body are beyond explanation apart from a creator. Again, you can argue this point if you'd like to, but to say that the human body just happened, that it was a series of developmental mutations over billions of years, pushing it out far enough doesn't make it true. The complexity of our universe, the complexity of our world, the complexity of the human body, these can only be explained through a creator. So when we begin to wrestle with this idea of faith, it must be based on some evidence. What's the evidence that sparks the conversation around faith? It's understanding that if there's a creator, then clearly there's a plan in the universe and a plan on our planet and a plan in our bodies. Maybe there's a plan beyond that. And it's beginning, again, as I mentioned while we were having the conversation, it's beginning to pull the thread, to ask the questions, and then to follow the answers to those questions where they lead. Faith is not a hope so. It's not. I feel so bad for even Christian people that I talk to that think that faith is a hope so. I say Christian people, I'm a Christian, that's my perspective on faith. But other folks who are religious people who are deeply invested in a relationship with God, again, depending on what that may look like for each person, they would say, I just hope it works out. I hope it all comes together. I hope it all makes sense. And for them, that's faith. That's not faith. Faith is looking at who God is and understanding there is a plan. It's then looking at what we call the Bible. We might, for shorthand, say it's His Word, because it is. It's His Word to us. It's His letter to us. Looking at what He said and then putting our confidence in the words that He spoke. Faith isn't having confidence in anything that He didn't say. Faith is looking at what He did say and then just accepting that He will do what He said He will do. That's faith. That's something that we can hang on to. There must be a foundation to that, again, as we described and we talked about. And you have to build faith on a foundation because there is substance and there is evidence. It's not a hope so. It's firm. It's rooted in something that matters. People live without faith. What a sad state of affairs that is, to see people going about their lives without faith. But faith is not a hope so. It's based on evidence. It's based on substance. The third thing I'd like to share with you. I wrote these things down. I didn't want to get them wrong. The third thing I'll share with you is this, that faith, real faith, the substance and evidence kind of faith, the built on a foundation kind of faith, always leads to hope. I love to talk about hope. If you've watched or listened to this show really at all, you've probably heard me ask a guest this question. What do you say to someone without hope? How do you define hope? I love to talk about hope. You know what hope is? Hope is confidence that there's something outside of my situation. People without hope are people who look at their own situation, the circle around their life, and they conclude that this is all there is. We are without hope when we conclude that there is nothing beyond what we can see. Nothing beyond what we can experience. Nothing beyond what we can hang on to. When we come to that conclusion, we are without hope. What is hope? Hope is understanding that although I can see this thing in the circle around me, I can experience this, I can see this, and some of it's good and some of it's really, really bad. But regardless, I have hope because I know that there's something beyond this. Have you ever known someone who is going through a terrible time in their life? Maybe the loss of a loved one, maybe a health challenge, maybe they just lost their job, or there's some other economic challenge that they're dealing with. And that person, although they're going through something that you would not want to go through, and you might even say, I don't know how they're doing this, you see what they're dealing with, and yet there's so much hope. Why? Because they're confident that what they see, what they're dealing with right now is not all there is. Well, where does that hope come from? Probably one of two places. Either they're delusional, right? We know some people, they're kind of delusional. They're always happy, right? Because there's nothing else out there, or it's really big or whatever. They're kind of delusional, just going through life. That's one place. But the other place that produces hope is the place of faith. You see, faith, the confidence in one who is transcendent. I love that word transcendent. It means outside of my own experience. When I put my confidence in God, my faith, right? You remember earlier we defined faith as confidence in. Not just belief in, but confidence in. When my faith is in God, when my confidence is in the Creator, the one who developed the atmosphere around the earth that allows us to breathe and function and survive and even enjoy ourselves. The one that keeps the earth on its axis at the exact right angle. The one that created a body as complex as ours. Our bodies are so resilient and yet so fragile at the same time. It's amazing. When our faith is in a God like that, then we can have hope. Faith is not about understanding everything. It's about believing. Putting our confidence in what was said. Putting our confidence in the one who could do it. I don't have to understand how it all works to have confidence in the one who does. And when I have confidence in the one who is outside of my own experience, what does that produce? It produces hope. So many people in our world are without hope. Maybe you're without hope. Maybe you're watching, maybe you're listening, maybe your experience right now is that I am hopeless. Maybe you have this on in the background because it was just the next show and you listen to it, but you don't have hope. Maybe you're watching it because someone sent it to you and you're without hope. Hope is understanding there's something beyond what I'm experiencing right now. Where does that hope come from? Well, either delusion or better, faith in the one who created and sustains all of life. Faith leads to hope. As you heard that conversation, I trust that one of your big takeaways was that it's okay to ask questions. This is where I'll end our conclusion. It's okay to ask questions. I was raised in the church. I was raised around Christian people, religious people. I was raised around some very good people, and I'm very thankful for that. I would not be who I am today without them. Now, they may feel bad about me saying that, right? They don't like who I am today. But regardless, I was raised around some very good people that encouraged me to ask questions. But having grown up around the church and church people and religious people, I know there are a lot of people out there that would get very upset when others started to ask questions. They would say that faith is simply believing, and it is blind believing. It's jumping off into the abyss and hoping it all somehow works out. Faith is just trusting enough, and you should never ask questions, because if you ask questions, maybe you'll peel back the curtain and not like what you see on the other side of that. Often the people who tell you not to ask questions are insecure personally because they don't ask questions, nor do they know the answers to a lot of the questions. Listen to me. If I've added any value to your life, please take this away. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Now, if you're going to ask questions, ask them sincerely, seeking real answers. A lot of people ask questions just to put others down or to prove that there's no value. That's not what I'm talking about. That's ridiculous. But when it comes to faith, this issue is way too important to just take someone's word for it. Why do you believe the Bible? If you don't know the answer to that question, figure it out. Ask questions. Determine why you do. If you don't, why don't you? Ask questions. Figure it out. Jump into it. And on we could go. It's okay to ask questions. And beyond being okay, it is essential if your faith will be real. I believe that some folks who say things like, I've lost my faith, they lost their faith because they had a very loose grasp on it in the first place. They lost their faith because they never asked enough questions to get a firm hold on it so that when life shook it up, they could continue hanging on. Ask questions. Figure it out. Understand why you have faith and in whom you have faith. And you'll be very, very happy that you did. This is a wonderful conversation today. And I'm glad that we got to share it with you. I love talking about really all of the topics we discuss here, but I am no happier, no more happy, never happier. I'm also not good at grammar, but I'm the happiest when we're discussing matters of faith because they impact every area of our lives. And I trust that this was a help to you today. Please, if you have not yet, again, I encourage folks to do this all of the time. Maybe you get tired of hearing it, but if you have not yet, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We put tons of content on there, and it's all intended to help you and help those that you care about. Go ahead, subscribe, like, and that will let you know when new content comes online. If you're listening somewhere else, jump over to our YouTube channel when you get a chance, and leave a comment, share this content out, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.